First of all, thanks a lot for the opportunity to speak today at a subject close to my heart. So Offsite and Modular, the future of construction assembly. What I don't want to do is, I'm not trying to convert you all into believers today. More, I'm going to kind of explain why I think we should all be healthy agnostics, not in a Richard Dawkins sense, but more to do with how we approach Offsite and our products. As ever, we're taught with Wilmot Dixon that a good place to start is always with the why. And I'd recommend those of you that may not have read it already, a book by Simon Sinek on this fact. So if we look at the why we need to change. So it can't have escaped anyone's attention that for the last 3, 4, 5 years, there's been a whole raft of reports that have been produced and issued by the industry, starting from Mark's report, Modernise or Die, onto the industrial strategy in July 2018, Offsite Manufacturing Building for Change, a House of Lords committee report, and then even more recently, I think Paul just mentioned the McKinsey report, which came out earlier this year, and then a white paper, Planning for the Future, which all of these highlight the need to look at innovative ways to modernise our industry. And if we look at the McKinsey report in particular, hopefully that's visible on the screen, there's a few themes that come out of that. So there is a persistent scarcity of skilled labour. There's changing regulations and incentives, especially in the the aftermath of the tragic events at Grenfell, which are only really pushing us to a position that we need to be and we should have been at anyway. And there's the whole industrialisation process, embracing offsite manufacturing, embracing the digital aspects of things. And all of those really combine to make a kind of perfect storm situation for us. But why don't we just carry on doing what we've always done? Good enough for them, good enough for them, and good enough for them as well. Doesn't really work like that, because as the McKinsey report says, and as originally also highlighted in the Farmer Review, there just is not enough people to continue to build the way that we always have done. So you can see some graphs there. It's been, as a high level estimate, it's been estimated that for every one person that joins the construction industry, unfortunately, there are 5 people that leave. And if we were live, normally at conferences, I'll kind of ask people to do a show of hands. Who's got kids? Keep your hands up if you'd advocate that they go into construction. And regrettably, it's not a high percentage. So if we can't advocate our own industry, what hope do we have? More evidence there, although this graph is slightly out of date. You can see that there's a reasonable correlation between the amount of new homes that are commissioned and the availability of bricklayers. And that situation is only becoming worse. We know obviously about Brexit. There's a re-emigration or remigration of labour, often skilled labour, back onto the continent as the pound's kind of devalued against the euro. So we're only going to see those challenges become more and more to the fore. So we should do something about it, and governments love to do something about it, set committees up. So there's the Standardisation and New Methods of Construction Committee, which is set up by the government to examine the construction industry, report on ways of solving the problems caused by both shortages in skilled labour and building materials. Probably never heard of it. That's because actually it ran from 1919 to 1921. There you go. There's London in the peak of those years, and what that really goes to show is there's nothing new in life. All of these things are cycles, and unless we find a way to permanently break a cycle, we're just going to end up in the same thing. And while I was looking for that image, I actually found this image, which really kind of staggered me. That was from 1920 and the flu epidemic at that time. So there's nothing new. The last bit in the McKinsey report is worth a couple of paragraphs worth highlighting. Overall, offsite construction is still a relatively young and immature part of the larger construction ecosystem, with higher fragmentation and smaller skilled players that mostly use manual labour. So I couldn't echo that enough, really. For every one of the major players that we see, your L&Gs, your Ilkes, etc., we need to remember that there are a whole tier of manufacturers and offsite suppliers which are of a much smaller scale who want to grow, and it's part of our duty to find a mechanism to unlock that. And then obviously they highlight the whole thing of product-based approaches, standardization, sustainability, which is massive for us at Wilmot Dixon, and really this idea of this shift. from manual to automated production. And we know it can be done. So if we look at the 44-storey, 135-metre high tower at 101 George Street in Croydon, or the work that's been done in Wembley, which has sprung up dramatically over the last years, we can see the art of the possible. And obviously both of these are modular schemes, but there is a whole raft of solutions that can and should be employed. So if we, March 2019, there was the MMC definition framework launched. If we take a brief canter through this, we'll realise that the definitions of modern methods of construction are much wider than just modular. Nothing wrong with modular, it's a great solution in the right place. But we need to remember that that is part of a wider spectrum of solutions. So that encompasses, as I say, category 1, 3D primary structural systems, which are in effect modular, 2D primary systems, such as timber frame, light gauge steel frame. Category 3, pre-manufactured structural members, so that encompasses things like precast floors and stairs. Category 4, additive manufacturing, 3D printing, which is still some way off in my view, and I believe there's still, in my opinion, legal issues about liability for manufactured products in those regards, but certainly exciting for the future. We then get on to category 5, pre-manufactured elements, which could encompass bathroom pods, services risers, distribution cupboards, basically more highly intensed, the serviced areas, which can be fabricated off-site. Category 6, so more traditional building products that are just represent a slightly more advanced manufacturing approach, so things like Porotherm. And then category 7, site processes, or as we could call it, robots and stuff. All of which have the potential, but equally are, several years away from mainstream adoption. So at Wilmot Dixon, what's our approach to MMC / offsite / OSM / PMV, call it what you will. And for me, really, those terms are fairly interchangeable. But we've got a long track record in the use of offsite forms of construction. We've done virtually all of those categories over recent years. We've delivered about 20,000 timber frame homes, similar number of light gauge steel frame homes, secondary schools using modular, 10,000 bathroom pods. So we've got quite a broad experience, and what that experience has termed us that what we need to do is realise the benefits of driving anything, which ties into the calculation for PMV that reduces the on-site labour element. Going back to, if you can't get the skills, if you can't get the people, we need to find a better way to do it. And in our eyes, it's essential to identify and apply the most appropriate solution for each project. And sometimes that will be off-site, sometimes that may be traditional. But the key is to do that as early in the process, because we know that's when we can really generate the value. So we'll always promote MMC and high pre-manufactured solutions wherever they can add value, but never just for the sake of it. And we do have an internal target to achieve 70% PMV by 2025. But we need to remember, just having a high PMV value is not a guarantee of success. So therefore, it's also vital to quantitatively measure the outcomes of MMC adoption, or any output from a project. But this is really rarely done. Whenever I try to have the debate with somebody internally within Wilmot Dixon, it's very difficult to rely on output facts and figures to compare one form of building construction against another, because quite simply they just don't exist. And we've recognized this, and tying into this notion of early selection impact. So the ability to pick the right thing to maximize the benefit. So tying into that, we recognize this, and Wilmot Dixon, alongside a number of other main players in the industry and other contractors, were happy to sponsor a piece of research that was done by the University of Cambridge and Syria, which actually looked at how a methodology could be established to quantify the benefits of offsite construction. It's a really good document. I would recommend it to you. It's not a weighty tome, but it's got a really good recommendations for a variety of performance measurements tools that could be applied. What was the main conclusion? The main conclusion was, alas, there is not enough data to draw a conclusion which tells us something about ourselves. So what we need to do is to work with industry bodies to try and embody this methodology into various procurement routes and into across the other industry bodies, so that we can start to get aggregated data. And it's only if we get that aggregated data and we can actually prove a convincing case that I think we'll really make offsite mainstream and bridge the adoption gap that all new technologies and systems kind of suffer from. So a quick run through the benefits or otherwise of offsite as we see them. So when done right, it creates precision manufactured products which are backed up by appropriate test certification. Again, all the more important when we're in a post-Grenfell world, and when we talk about the golden thread of information. It should reduce the reliance upon skilled resource. The whole point of adopting factory-based processes and the on-site assemblies is to de-skill the resource that we need on site. Arguably better health and safety, and as we saw in the aftermath, the immediate aftermath of the initial lockdown, greater COVID resilience. It's far easier to safely manage works in a controlled factory environment than it is on a live site. There should be fewer interfaces. If we adopt a proper DFMA design for manufacturing assembly methodology, there should be fewer interfaces, fewer things to go wrong, fewer components to manufacture, which generates the potential for faster on-site assembly. I'll come back to that. And arguably, because we can focus on the manufacturing process and the assembly process, we should be able to make it lower carbon intensive than traditional construction. And finally, from a certification point of view, if the systems and the solutions that we use are certified under BOPAS, then from a mortgageability point of view, it should be fully backed by the Council of Mortgage Lenders. Now, as with anything, there's a flip side to it. So considerations. You need to remember that the benefits of using offsite are often linked to structural efficiency. So for example, we need to make sure consistent load pass and scale. So from a program benefits point of view, yes, certain solutions can be much quicker, but we need to ask ourselves on a job by job basis, and we're working with the Procuring for Value toolkit through Constructing Excellence to look at this. Program benefits are not always beneficial. So for example, on a build to rent scheme, you would want as many units handed over as quickly as possible to start generating a rental income. That might not be the same driver on a residential scheme that's for sale, where the criteria for handing over units for sale will be the ability to sell those units upstream to the end purchasers. If you can only sell 2 units a scheme, the developers will not want to take 5 units a week within the same period. A consideration of design flexibility over the lifetime of the asset. So we're seeing more and more customers wanting to adopt a long life loose fit approach, and sometimes that will not always work for offsite in terms of load pass. Some work better than others, so again that needs to be considered. As we said, there's partly an immature supply chain, not just in terms of scale, but also in terms of financial covenant strength, and that's something that we are starting to see. And so, as ever, doing the due diligence is the key thing for that, to make sure that we can work with the right partners and we can work to support each other's businesses. Although minimal, there is the potential for systematic failure. So clearly, if we use the same components and solutions time and time again, if there is a systematic failure, that doesn't just affect one project, that can affect an entire portfolio, and that's definitely something to consider. There are some combustibility issues that need to be addressed. So certain systems contain limited or combustible elements which are acceptable in law below certain height thresholds, but it depends. At Wilmot Dixon, we've gone beyond that, and we've actually banned combustibilities or limited combustibilities, in the majority of instances. So it's something to consider. And then finally, there are limitations, or last but one, there are limitations on available capacity. I think the perception out there is that offsite is a panacea and there's unlimited capacity, and that just is not the case. In fact, when we look at the total amount of capacity available across all of the offsite manufacturers in the UK, as a percentage of the demand, or the potential demand, we realize that it's not that great at the moment. And the key to that is to work together to unlock more capacity, to drive a greater certainty of pipelines, so that manufacturers can invest in both automating their factories and driving actual capacity up themselves. And then the last one, solutions are often supplier specific. So is this a barrier to adoption? So many offsite manufacturers think that having a specific piece of intellectual property, a specific way to put things together, is a good thing. I'm not so sure, because you then end up with an instance where if you need to swap supplier for any reason, because of a lack of capacity, because things change, then arguably that becomes a barrier to adoption. So I would argue that actually what we want from a Wilmot-Dixon point of view is a more agnostic technology, agnostic solutions that are more interchangeable, and around the idea of common platform components, which I know is a lot of work that is underway at the moment. So we've seen the likes of the great work that Bryden Wood have done on their platform thought leadership. We've seen Seismic, and now Seismic 2, which represents standard platform solutions for new schools through the consortium of partners that you can see at the bottom there. And then finally, the approach to, again, the thought leadership from the Construction Innovation Hub with regards to platform construction and a methodology for getting there and achieving it. So in summary, modular and the other forms of offsite construction are a great solution. They offer us many ways to address the considerations and the challenges that construction has at the moment. But they do come with their own limitations, which if we work together, we aggregate our demand, we aggregate our technologies, and we systematically work through to integrate various systems together so that they become more and more interchangeable in a platform consideration, then absolutely we should advocate those, and we should help them to grow. So you could argue, yes, in that case, I am a believer. I'm a very firm believer that we need to get it to work, and we need to change our industry. So let's start today. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate that and your insights. We've got a couple of questions actually, which would be good to get your feedback on. Clearly, you've been an advocate of these methodologies for a long time. I think that the current drive is different to previous initiatives. Do you see the built environment being more open to adopting the technologies now?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of timing. I think what we've seen in the past is that I started with Wilmot-Dixon back in 2000, and even then, every social housing job that we delivered, you had to tick the MMC box. You had to use a form of construction. And I think what we saw, that there was a really good groundswell of things. But then what happens is, unfortunately, every time we go into a recessionary cycle, we see traditional labour rates drop through the floor. And what that does is, because there's more fixed costs in the factory approach to construction, proportionally, it makes factory-based construction appear less economically advantageous.
I see, yeah.
So what happens is, unfortunately, people regress back to their normal behaviours, and traditional takes off again. Then we get into a better economic cycle. Up it goes, and then we see more. Now, I think this time, irrespective of economics, the fact is there are not enough people to build. There's not enough capacity to build. And I think with the push that's coming from central and local governments in this regard, and the ability of technology to drive the efficiencies and the standardization once and for all, I really think that that's enough of a catalyst to really get us to the tipping point. Where we can, we need to just get to a better future. I can't believe we still build things that we do, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I wonder what about clients and kind of the procurement routes? Are they becoming more educated in the application of these, or do you still see it as a design and technology solution being offered to them?
No, I think we're seeing more and more. I think we're seeing more and more customers. So I can think, like if you look at the recent Department for Education frameworks, the Department for Health. They're doing a great work to, particularly in modular, to drive up the use of offsite. And we're also seeing it more across central government. Yes, there was a presumption in favour, didn't really mean much unless you actually put a quantifiable reason and you force it through. But yeah, I think we are seeing a groundswell now. I think it's just getting people, in my humble opinion, just getting people to realise that that spectrum exists and picking the right thing. So, you know, modular is fantastic. It's one solution. We need to make sure we use all of the solutions if we need to deliver what we need to deliver.
And I think you've mentioned that the majority of those kind of offsite suppliers were quite small operations, many of them with a desire to scale up.
Yeah.
Is that still the case?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you know, when we speak to the manufacturers that we use, to invest in a factory is an expensive exercise.
Yeah.
You know, a piece of equipment is hundreds of thousands of pounds. And, you know, it's unreasonable to expect partners to be able to invest that without a surety of pipeline. Because, you know, they all have the same challenges that we do as well. So I think what we need to look at is how, as customers, can we aggregate our pipeline and make it more visible? How can central government aggregate the pipeline across the key departments so that that becomes more visible as well? That gives people certainty. There's enough work to go around. We just need to make it a lot more visible and certain.
Thank you so much, Tim. That's really brilliant, and I look forward to you joining our panel for our Q&A session.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
If you haven't felt like your question's been picked up, we'll try and add those to the panel session later on. And there's MBS and staff teams around if you've got other queries. I'm sure you've also been joining the networking as well. Because next up, we have a pre-record from Jade Lewis at the Sustainable Energy Association. Jade wasn't able to be with us to present live, but she's kindly recorded her session amidst a load of other commitments. So we really do appreciate Jade doing that. Hopefully, Jade is going to join us for the panel session later on. Jade is Chief Executive of the Sustainable Energy Association, that's the SEA, and they're an industry body that offers innovative policy solutions, linking technology and the wider energy network to achieve that low carbon, secure energy future that the UK needs, with a strategic political approach to that work. Jade also describes herself as a Sherpa to the Innovation in Buildings work stream of the CLC. That's a term that many will know in civil service, the Construction Leadership Council, and brings a wealth of experience from Saint-Gobain for many years, collaborating to develop both renovation policy, but also smart technologies in the housing sector. So as soon as that's queued up and we're ready to play, we'll hear from Jade. Thank you.